Alright, I'm heading down to the new PokerGo studios. Looks sick from the outside. I'm pretty pumped to play this 100-200 game. Bunch of quote-unquote poker celebrities. It's 40K cap, which kind of sucks given what I want to do, but you know, the game should be fun, it should be gambly, everybody seems to be entertaining to chat with, and I'm gonna give you a little peek of the studio now. Hey everyone, I just wrapped up my session of Poker After Dark. We got to play in the new studio, it was super awesome. I'm really excited for what PokerGo seems to be putting in place. This studio is massive. We were on the main stage, which will be what they utilize as their feature table anytime that they have final tables in there or televised tournaments. But they actually have the capacity to hold, I believe, up to 10 tables. I know that they're already set up for 7, as that's where they're going to run the Super High Roller Bowl this year. And it's huge. I mean, they have 10 dedicated cameras alone just to the main feature table, with enough room to like run multiple crews, and it's very spacious, let's just put it that way. So really cool scene, really cool to see them putting so much effort into building out the televised version of this game. Interested to see what more they have in store moving forward. As far as my session tonight, it was a real test in my mental fortitude, and one that I probably marginally failed by the end. The game was just like, can it be the best and the worst all at the same time? The lineup was dreamy, it was chatty, it was old school, a lot of guys that you really want to be in there gambling with, guys that I appreciate playing with, guys like Antonio, Perkins, Dan Shack, even Cheese is like nice to have at the table. The unfortunate aspect of it was capped, which, you know, a lot of the guys that I just named, the reason why we're all good for the game, myself included, is because we give a lot of action. And it's just tough to do that with a 200 big blind cap, especially when every hand is being straddled, re-straddled, triple straddled. And then worst of all, what I really thought ruined the game was the minimum buy-in. The minimum buy-in being $10,000 is an insult. At 100, 200 with a 200 ante, and often playing 100, 200, 400 with a 200 ante, letting somebody come in for $10,000 and just take pot shots over and over really ruins the dynamic. There's just no maneuverability. There's no room to even attempt to make even remotely close to good solid plays. You're just pretty hamstrung to sitting around and waiting for the top of range. So I was pretty disappointed. Obviously I lost on top of that, and I would say it was half due to poor spots that I ran into, and half due to a bit of a lack of discipline. So I'm certainly not happy with how I played. I got hit in the face with the deck the first half of the session, but it really didn't matter, again, because we were playing 6-handed, and 3 of the players only had $10,000 in front of them, Antonio included, which, you know, if you played with Antonio, the guy gives action. To have him sit with $10,000 is just like, it's a nightmare. So the second half of the session, I kind of just like ran the middle of my range into the top of theirs, which makes perfect sense. Just given the structure of the game, a lot of these guys are incentivized to just wait and wait and wait. You know, to their credit, they did a good job. Hellmuth ran 10,000 into 50, I think. By the end, very proud of himself. You know, much to my chagrin. The rumor is that you guys like hands, you're gonna get some hands. So the first one I want to talk about was pretty early in the session. It was when I still had a chance to win in this thing. Like I said earlier, or like I had prefaced, half the table had only bought in for 10,000, which was the minimum, which was the equivalent of only 50 big blinds. Sometimes we were playing 1, 2, 4 with a 200 ante. So really it's a lot closer to, I don't know, about 30 blinds effective. In the hand that I'm first going to discuss, it folds to Antonio on the button. He decides to open for 600. I have 2 kings in the small blind, and I make it 2,500, and we're 13,000 effective. Now, I immediately regretted my sizing, just given stack depth and how wide Antonio probably is on the button here. I'm kind of putting him to decision for stacks right here, right now. And me just knowing Antonio for who he is, he's a peeler. So he's going to want to be looking for a price and calling. And I'm kind of like forcing him down a path where he's going to start making some correct folds. And if I could do it all over again, I would have made it 2K. And then comes the Dan Shack in the big blind, who has a 40K stack, which is fantastic, and he begins to tank. So we later find out that he had a real hand in a real spot, and to his credit, or to my surprise, I guess, he actually mucked pocket 8s. I think that that is somewhere between a very disciplined fold and a mistake. And I lean a little bit towards the side of a mistake, just because of the dynamic that Antonio and I are generally going to have. We're going to play a lot of pots, and we're going to battle each other pretty hard. However, again, talking about my sizing, I kind of leave Dan no choice but to fold. He can't really cold call when Antonio has a hand. He's just going to be shoving for 13,000. He can't really 4-bet. I mean, he could 4-bet fold, but like 8s kind of suck in that scenario to turn into a bluff. So I actually, in spite of the fact that I think given the dynamic, it may be a mistake, from a technical aspect, it's a really good laydown. So kudos to Dan for that. Comes back to Antonio, and he 5-bets to, I don't know, something in the neighborhood of 7K. I shove, he calls, and he has the whopping King 6 of hearts. Unfortunately, the board ran out ace, queen, jack, turn 10. We chopped that one up because we only ran it once, because obviously King 6 isn't going to win that spot twice. So I really didn't get off to the start that I had hoped for. I guess we could talk about one of the bigger hands that I played and lost against Dan Shack. Folds to me in, I believe, middle position, and I open queen jack of hearts for either 600 or 1,000, I don't recall. And Dan Shack 3-bets me, I believe, to 2,500, and we are about 40K effective. Folds back to me. This is actually a pretty close spot, which is just demonstrates how bad the game is at this moment from a dynamic standpoint. Usually this is like just kind of a pretty good deep stacked hand to defend against 3-bets with, and you're kind of happy to do so. But I had already seen Dan flat pretty strong against me earlier in the session, and everybody was playing like a more cagey, trappy pre-flop style where there was absolutely no bluffing going on. So we can eliminate all 3-bet bluffs here and just understand that it's the top. What the top is defined as is a little bit more left for debate, I guess. In the moment, I'm thinking it's like 10s plus ace queen, but it may actually be more like queens plus ace king. I'm not really sure. We can't really know. But I do have queen jack suited, and it's a good enough hand to continue with, even though I think it's a pretty close spot given how tight Dan's been playing. So I continue through a call, and we see a flop of queen 9 brick with the king brick of hearts. So I now flop a gut shot straight flush draw and continue through a check. Dan c-bets for, I believe, 2,500, and I make it 7,500, setting myself up for a pot-sized turn shove. And this is really where the hand can be examined at its deepest point. In a very general sense, I think that this play is fine. When we're against opponents who have a reasonably wider 3-bet range, this play will be relatively okay. Number one, because our equity will, in a lot of scenarios, just make up for the times that we're wrong. But also just because our opponent should have hands like ace-10 suited, ace-jack, ace-queen. Hands that on an advantageous board like this will c-bet and then will fold to our check raise. In this spot, however, Dan is very concentrated towards having the top of his range. And because of that, I should be very mindful of actually playing for stacks, because he's more often than not just going to have a hand that qualifies for it. Now, I'm kind of banking on the fact that he has all of his combinations of 10s, all of his combinations of ace-queen, and if I'm wrong, then I'm making pretty big EV errors here. In either regard, my read on the situation was this game is very tight, stacks are very shallow. Dan's one of the few guys who I think could possibly overfold versus some aggression, and he's one of the only stacks that I actually have some post-flop playability against because we are only 2 of 3 stacks that are 40k deep at this point. So in my head, it was kind of like, I want to be able to play 80k pots, and I have enough equity to justify doing so here. Looking back on it, I think I'm making a pretty big mistake here because Dan's probably a lot tighter in his 3-bet range than 10s plus ace-queen. So he continues through a call, and when that happens, in my mind, I'm pretty confident that he has one of 3 combinations of hands. He's going to have either pocket kings for top set, and he's trapping, or he's going to have queens and jacks, which, yes, I block, but I think that they're the kind of only hands that he can defend one and then potentially fold on the turn. So when the turn is brick, I decide that, I kind of set this lineup to be all in on the turn, and I'm just going to continue forward with the plan, hoping that he does still possess one of those 2 hands in queens and jacks that could potentially fold. I shove, and I really shouldn't have fold equity against queens here. Like, yeah, of course, I can play king-queen this way, and yes, of course, I should be just calling pre-flop with ace-king because I think Dan is so nutted. And also, I should have pocket 9s given this line. But it's just like, I have so many draws, and I have so many combo draws available to me that if you're going to c-bet queens on this board texture on the flop, you're kind of just resigned to bluff catching the rest of the way. So he does eventually make the call with queens, deducing that I just don't have king-queen here very often. He completely ruled out the idea that I would ever have ace-king, which is reasonable, and never even considered the fact that I could have a set of 9s, just listening to his thoughts out loud. We run it twice. I brick both. I'm stuck 40,000. Okay, so the next hand I'd like to discuss was against Don Wynn. I've never played against him before, but the rumor was if we get him stuck, he will be good for the game. However, in this particular hand, he did put me to a bit of a decision. So Antonio had put the straddle on to 400. I pick up Jack 10 offsuit, Jack of hearts, 10 of spades under the gun, and elect to make it 1500. Folds around to Mr. Wynn on the button. He chooses the flat, and we go heads up. Flop comes down 10-8, 7, all clubs. I elect to check. He checks behind. Turn is the 3 of diamonds, and I continue for 2,500 into roughly 3,700, 3,800, 3,900, something like that. And he raises me to 8,000. Now, this is a bit of a tough spot because on a board texture like this, it makes a ton of sense for him to be slow playing big hands. When I check, I often, the perception is that I often have a check give up. I'm not necessarily going to split that way. I'm just going to be checking this board texture at a really, really, really high frequency. So I'll actually still retain a lot of my overpairs. I'll retain a lot of my ace highs with a club. I'll retain some of my 2 pairs and maybe even some sets. I just really don't have very much of a c-bet plan in place for a 10-8-7 all club board. So, it does seem like his range is incredibly protected here, and that's a little frightening when you just have a naked 10. However, that being said, my hand is pretty under-repped. I have probably one of my worst hands that I could bluff catch with, but I do have a gut shot to a straight if it potentially is good. I unblock all of his jack high or hands that could contain the jack of clubs, which would be a gutty flush draw, which is a very probable hand that he could be doing this with. So it's really close, I think. But since I don't know too much about him, I'm going to make him prove it to me. My plan was to call 1 and unimproved on the river. I'm probably just going to be forced to check fold. River is a total brick. I check. He checks back. Lucky for me, he had some showdown value with ace-queen high. And I scoop a marginally sized pot. As played, if I were in his shoes, I think I would have just started betting from flop on. His hand has more than enough equity to kind of just be a 3-barrel stack-off candidate.
Fire
So
one
Berkey
more, man.
relieved to feel the heat on the end.
Oh, fire all in right there.
But that's
Maybe
Berkey.
you win.
He's a rational person. When a king comes
That's
on
the
the board,
first time I've ever been called that, Bill. Thank you. All right, so this next hand that I want to talk about was against the one and only, the infamous, Mr. Being the Greatest himself, Phil Hellmuth. He was incredibly proud of himself for nursing a 7K stack in this 100, 200, sometimes 400, sometimes 400, 800, 1600 game. And I kind of wanted to remind him that he's making egregious errors off of this stack and he's just not performing as well as he is touting to the table. So in this particular hand, he opens the 700. Now, I don't want to get too deep into it, but basically off the pace of play and how I'd seen him play the short stack thus far, what I'd noticed is when he raises, he's light. He's in the marginal portion of his range. He can't limp call, basically, and he's just trying to over-represent his range. When he limps, he's pulled, and very much topside weighted. I'm sure he limps some bad hands too, like largely small pocket pairs that will allow him to set mine. So basically it's just like a pair range, pretty much like deuces through aces. So that being said, he opens in this particular hand to 700, and I want to attack him. He only has 35 big blinds, but I know that his stack off frequency at this depth when he's opening with marginal hands is just about 0. So if I just take initiative, I'm going to have a cheap post-flop bluff, and every time he misses, he's going to be forced to check fold. And that's precisely what happens in this hand. He opens the 700 in early position. I 3-bet him with 7-6 of hearts to 1700, just enough to maintain initiative and keep the SPR moving forward at about 2. Flop comes down 10-8-3, I believe, 2 diamonds and a heart. He checks. I bet 1,000 into 4,000, and he folds the king-jack high. I table the 7-6 for a couple yucks, and we move on with me ultimately finishing the session the biggest loser, and Phil finishing, I believe, the biggest winner in the game. So that's all we have from the Poker After Dark review. We're trying something a little bit new. I'm giving you guys a lot of hand history reviews. It seems like that's the popular trend these days, and I took my lumps tonight. It sucks to lose on TV. It sucks to consistently lose on TV. And it sucks even worse to consistently lose on TV in some of the softer lineups that you're going to play. But what you have to consider is that it's only a 6-hour session. The game speed is about 1/3 of what it actually is in a real live environment. So you're seeing fewer hands. You're presented fewer spots. The time is long and taxing. And quite frankly, the environment just plays differently. A lot of these guys, if you stuck them behind closed doors and didn't get to show their cards to the public, would play very, very differently. And that's generally good for us. I probably need to go back and examine some of my play, shift my game style a little bit. Coincidentally, I think the best that I've ever played on Poker After Dark was in the absolute toughest lineup, the one with all the killers in Rumble for the Jungle Week. So, I think I just need to re-examine these kind of softer lineups that I'm getting thrown into, understand that their threshold of pain is much, much, much lower than that of the pro lineups. So they're just playing tighter. They're playing tighter, they're presenting stronger ranges, and there just isn't really a lot of room to gamble. The good news is, I think that I've done a pretty good job demonstrating my value as a facilitator. No matter what game I've been in thus far, money has moved. I haven't really played in very many nitty games. I think tonight was probably one of the worst, and the cap just had a lot to do with that. So I'm happy to play that role. I'm not happy to lose, but I'm happy that there's some value being derived from it. I just hope to keep getting these invites back and giving it my best shot. So we got a lot coming up for you guys moving forward in the next month or two. The World Series is right around the corner, as everybody is well aware. We are launching our beta site, very likely to be the first week of June. From there, we're going to be taking back as much feedback as we can and pushing forward as fast as we can to get the subscription service out to everybody. We're playing full schedules, Solve for Why is going to officially be on hiatus starting June 1, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to see a lot of us. We got some projects in the works. We are going to try to do something big during the World Series. We're going to try to do something more consistent. Hopefully we're going to be getting you guys a hand or two of the day, kind of talking our way through these tournament spots. And more importantly, we're going to get some fucking six-figure scores. It's been too long. So look for that. Look for us on the Feldt. Pray for us to get to some final tables. And, keep tuning in. Keep subscribing. Keep clicking the links below and leaving us comments. Thank you so much for all your feedback. We appreciate each and every one of you.